our wonderful panelists. So I'll just go through some quick house rules just before we begin our discussion. First of all, I wanted to inform all of us that this session is being recorded. So we believe it's important to let you know, first of all, because of privacy reasons, and so that we can all play our parts to contribute to a flawless recording experience. This session is also going to be streamed live on YouTube because we anticipate that we may reach a maximum limit of number of attendees, and then we'll have to still accommodate people who registered. So in case you're logged out and you can't log in because of network issues or because the house is full, we're streaming live on YouTube. So the second housekeeping rule per se is, could we all keep our microphones muted while we're not talking? Only speakers will be allowed to speak. And if you're a speaker, when it's time for you to speak, kindly unmute yourself and mute yourself back when you're done speaking by clicking on the mute button. Also, I would like to remind us to use the chat box feature. Depending on your device, it could be at the bottom of your screen, it could be at the right-hand side of your screen to ask questions and just participate in conversations. I would also encourage everyone to share our thoughts and the most striking ideas from this conversation using social media. You can use the hashtag Rethinking Education. So I'll just take the hashtag again, Rethinking Education. So you can use that on Twitter, you can use that on Instagram, you can use that on Facebook, whatever social media platform you're most comfortable or conversant with, including LinkedIn. So our team will be collating all the ideas as part of the final report, and it will be sent out to all participants and partners. I hope this is clear to everyone. And then if you have any further questions during this, in the course of the conversation, kindly put it down in the chat box. I already see Stephen has already made that announcement there. So I would like us to start quickly by brief introductions. We don't need to put on our mics to do that. We'll just use the chat box session. I know we have a diverse audience of panelists and attendees from different parts of the country and even different parts of the world. So I'd just like to know where everyone is from. So in the chat section, could you just put your name, where you're listening in from, what you do, and just because we're in the middle of a global pandemic, if you like, you could just put a thing or two on how this has affected you the most and what you're most excited to get back to when this is all over. Just to see our interesting answers. So your name, where you're listening in from, what you do, and then something you'll be excited to get back to after the lockdown and everything surrounding the epidemic is over. Okay, I'm waiting for answers. All right, so while we'll be waiting for that, I'll just take this moment now to introduce our panelists so that we can get started on our discussion already. So allow me to introduce our dynamic set of distinguished panelists. There are 4 in number, and I think everyone is present already, so we wouldn't have to wait for anyone. Okay, perfect. So I would first introduce Omozino Ego. Omozino is the founder of Udemy. It's a career guidance and talent matching company. She's an expert in human capital development, specifically in education, career guidance and counseling, behavior psychology and analytics, technology, product development, and innovation. That's such a powerful, powerful bio. Our second panelist today is Femi Longe. Femi is the founder of Kisto. It's a new innovative company building a platform to connect young Africans to opportunities where they can use and showcase their competencies as a pathway to find jobs, further education opportunities, or entrepreneurship. Before starting Kisto, Femi was the co-founder and director of innovation consulting at the continent's top technology incubation center, the Co-Creation Hub. I'm sure a lot of us have come across the Co-Creation Hub. We're very excited to have Femi as one of our panelists today. Our third panelist today is Zil Akariwe. Zil is currently the CEO of the Graham Black Group. It's a group of financial advisory and procurement service companies with clients in oil and gas sector, agriculture, and financial services. Zil is a top thinker and co-hosts a fantastic critical thinking radio show on Lagos Talks 91.3 FM. Our fourth panelist today is Michael Ajayi. Michael is the country director of Enactus Nigeria. Enactus is a global nonprofit organization that is dedicated to enabling human progress by providing participating undergraduates the training, the linkages, and other resources they need to become innovative, courageous, committed, and value-driven business leaders with a head for business and a heart for the world. Michael is also a Fulbright Fellow and is responsible for building the Enactus team in Nigeria, where he leads strategy and fundraising. So as you can see, everyone, our panelists are really industry leaders, and I'm really excited to have conversations with them moving forward. They'll be sharing ideas and lessons from their experiences building programs for young people across the continent. So I can already see we have an introduction. Welcome, Ugo from Abuja. Ugo is excited to get in touch with his family members across the country. That's wonderful. All right, I'll just talk briefly about how this session is going to run. The session is going to run in two parts. We'll kick off with introductory questions, then I'll be following up with some questions based on things that have been discussed in the introductory section, and then the audience can join in the conversation and ask questions. So let's just get right into it. Statistics has shown us that 25% of high school graduates in Nigeria go on to some form of formal education. That means just 1 in 4 high school graduates in Nigeria go on to formal further education like universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education. So while higher education should be a means to an end, that doesn't seem to be a case in our country, unfortunately. Students get into 4-year programs, sometimes up to 6-year programs in universities, and come out unemployable after graduation. In many cases, these students are forced to take on courses that were their second or third choice programs because schools in the country have these class quotas systems where they have to fill certain quotas for each class. Post-secondary education is also built on the foundation of courses taken in senior secondary school, a decision most of the students make with little information. We've also seen that counseling is non-existent and people struggle because they do not have the personality, understanding, and inbuilt talent for the courses that they're taking. We've also seen that in our setting, the course options are not evolving with global trends and new realities. Courses have been the same for the past 10 years. I mean, we have pressing questions like why there's still a course called oil and gas accounting, and then there's none called oil palm accounting when we're trying to diversify our economy. Diversification of the Nigerian economy has been an ongoing conversation for so many years. And then another important question is, why must everyone try to attend 4-year universities? Or what happens to those who don't end up going into formal further education? So the first question I would like to throw to our panelists, Zino, Michael, Femi, and Zil, is what is the one thing that you would include in designing a different post-secondary education that actually leads to prosperities for individuals and the nation? So I'll start with Zino. So Zino, please, you could unmute your mic.
Oh my, okay. So I just had a happy laugh when you said you start with That's a very interesting question. It's nice to be here. Nice to meet everybody. Nice to meet fellow panelists and everyone who's in attendance. So if I were to redesign a post-secondary school, if I understand, is it a post-secondary school or a secondary school?
A post-secondary school education.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so if I were to design, I think the first thing that I would emphasize on is self-awareness.
Okay.
And this is because, I mean, over 7 years of working in this industry, and I realized that my real work is to fit square pegs into square holes. And the real problem that we have is because square pegs are trying to fit into round holes. And because we are doing everything that we can to fit the people, the wrong talent in the wrong places, right? And
Hmm.
expect them to deliver. And so that has been a reoccurring problem. And that is what I think is the root cause problem, right? So um, profiling 1,000 people and seeing over 1,000 people and seeing that when people are applying for roles, they're applying for the wrong roles.
Hmm.
They're applying for roles that do not fit their natural competencies or natural abilities. They're applying for roles they have no match for, right? And maybe
Yes.
they did well during the interview. Their CV is great. They've done perfect CV writing and they aced their interview, right? And they get on the job and they are struggling, right? So the manager sees that this person is struggling and says, "Oh, well, this person, let's send him for training." Now you're wasting money. Your first of all, salary is being wasted,
Mm-hmm.
and then training money is being wasted because you're sending someone who isn't even the right fit for that job, and you're expecting this person to increase. Now, if this person with a little self-awareness, just little insight sees that this person is not suitable for this role, and I've seen it happen with our clients. I've seen it happen with our users, and then that week there's a switch, there's a match between that role and the person's abilities, aspirations, and all of that, and that person begins to blossom. So
Yes.
this fundamental issue, right, and I've seen it as in my capacity as a behavioral scientist, is the reason why students struggle, is the reason why people come out and drop out of school.
Mm.
Is the reason why there's a lot of mental health issues. A lot of people are square pegs trying to fit into round
Mm.
holes. And
Okay.
what's still that the people that are placed into their care still try to force them to fit into those roles. So we believe that training would help. So the first thing is self-awareness. That's the most simplest. It's as basic as that, but I feel that's very, very key. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Zeno. I really, really agree with what you said. Self-awareness can save us a lot of time and resources. So I'll just move on to Michael. So Michael, what one key thing would you include in designing a different post-secondary education that leads to the prosperity of individuals and the nation at large?
Thank you very much, Ella. I just unmuted my microphone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
So, I mean, there is so much that needs to be done, okay, regarding the question you asked. First of all, there needs to be some sort of relationship or partnership or collaboration, whatever you call it, between the private sector as well as the education sector, such that there's that interaction that enables the private sector to be involved in the development of curriculums, because the private sector understands what skills they need today, what skills they will require in another 5 years or 10 years. And the administrators of the education sector need to understand the needs of the private sector or the workforce for today and for the future, so that in the development of the curricula, they are deliberate in ensuring that these skills are addressed and that the majority of the students who graduate from these post-secondary institutions have the requisite skills to fit into the job market. It is not surprising that today you have XYZ amount of students graduating from Nigerian tertiary institutions, and if you speak to any HR person anywhere, consultant anywhere, one of the things they will tell you is that most of the graduates are not employable. whereas some of them are first-class students. So there's that, and the reason why they are not are because there are specific skills that the job market requires today, that the job market will require in 5 years' time, that are different from the job market, the requirements of today, that are not being put into consideration in the teaching and the learning process of the institutions. So if I have the chance to make a change, I think that is one of the first few things I'm going to do to make sure that there is that relationship such that there is an interaction between the private sector and the public, the education sector as it is.
Wow, I think that's a very, very, very important point that you made about collaboration and cross information between both sectors. I'll quickly jump to Femi now to give us his opinion and his perspective on the question asked. So Femi, the floor is yours now.
Thank you. You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation. If you make me narrow down to one, I'll probably continue from where Michael stopped, and I'll probably say it will be decision making with data. At the moment, the bulk of what we call our post-tertiary education in post-secondary education in Nigeria is stagnant. A couple of years ago, I had to do some work at OAU where I finished from, and discovered that for the previous year was the year when, which is 3 years ago, was when the introduction to computer course that all students in the Faculty of Engineering took was changed from Fortran 77 to Java. Fortran 77, like the name implies, was created in 1977. And that's what we've been using to introduce engineers to technology in the 21st century. So leveraging and continuing from where Michael stopped, I think the data on job trends, on current and future job trends, needs to inform the content of the curriculum. But that data also needs to be fed into career guidance, which need to be reactivated in most of those institutions. In my 5 years in OAU, I never saw a guidance counselor once. In secondary school, the guidance counseling office, you almost go there when you have been in trouble. Whereas this should be the places where people are getting the support, and the people who staff those offices should have actual realistic data that they can use to guide the young people to improve their understanding of themselves, but also to also chart whichever course they're going to take going forward. In addition, data should, I'd probably also see how we can bring more local context into what goes on in the classroom. You're studying a course, most of the assignments you do are theoretical and not tied to what you would actually do if you got into industry. I think one of the reasons why I particularly tuned out when I was in university, and I know why lots of young people tune out, is because there's lots of theory and there's no answer to that question, why are we learning this? I think we can change,
I think these are really, really important points you made, Femi, about, using outdated data or outdated programs in our teaching. It's incredible that a program of modern that was made almost 50 years ago is still in use.
Yeah, and I guess, and just to add one last thing, and I think something else will also need to change, is how we evidence learning. Certificates are lies. Particularly in Nigeria, people are obsessed with certificates, which is the only way in which you can evidence what you can do. We know people who have the certificates who can't match up what's on the certificate. We need to get to the point where we find alternative ways to evidence what people can do. Because if the institutions don't do it, the employers are already doing it. And the sooner the institutions retool to match what the market is doing, the better for the students. I'll stop there for now.
Well, thank you, Femi, for those very, very insightful points. I'll just go to Zil now to hear what he has to say concerning the question.
Hi, thank you, Ella, and thanks again for organizing this. Half of me was hoping to actually see people's faces. I just feel like I'm speaking on radio again. But your question is very interesting. And what everybody has said, from what Zino has said and Michael and Femi, I completely agree with them. The only thing I would like to add to what they've said is that I don't think, in my opinion, that the issues we have with the university education is the university itself. I think we have issues around a combination of two things. One is our culture as a people, and the second is the reasons for going to the university in the first place. Those two things are mutually exclusive. Our culture as a people does not encourage question asking. That's just the culture across the country, in our religious settings, in our ethnical backgrounds. We are not raised, most of us, at least not in my generation, we are not raised to ask questions. And in my opinion, education is the ability to ask questions, relevant questions, to get answers that provide solutions. So why do people go to university? We don't go to university to learn. We go to university, like Femi said, to get a certificate. So a lot of people just want to have that certificate because we've attached a status to the certificate. We are not interested in the learning. We just want to have a university degree. So to make those changes, we have to start changing the thinking and the culture behind the reason we go to universities. I know quite a few people who went to universities, studied whatever they got, and came out and pursued their actual dreams. The question is, why did we have to waste 4 or 5 years of our lives so that we can dump it and chase what we actually want? The moment we can destigmatize people who do not go to universities, you're going to find that the attitude towards universities will change. If I want to be a builder and I want to cut pipes and that's what I want to do, I don't have to be a civil engineer. I can go and learn to do that. But because of the stigma around people who do not go to university, everybody rushes there. There are no jobs waiting for them. They're not even interested in the learning environment. And the culture also does not promote the ability for people that go to university to actually learn. Because universities, when I've seen videos of people that have gone to universities outside here that have been educated properly, your relationship with your lecturer is extremely interactive. It is a banter. Both the students and
Hello.
I hope we've not lost him.
I think we have. All right. While we wait for him to get back to the call or get his network back, I'll just try to speak on a little, just to summarize all the key points that were made. Zeno spoke about self-awareness. Michael's one thing was private and public partnerships. Femi talked about decision-making with data, and Zill's main point was changing the culture around education and the motivation. Okay, I think he's back now.
Yes, sorry, I think I lost you for a second, yes. But I was concluding by saying that we need to destigmatize those that do not go to universities. We need to promote the alternative tertiary institutions. We need to make sure that those who go into vocations or skills can live a quality of life commensurate with those that went to university, so that there is no class issue of going to university. University should be a dream you want to pursue in an area you want and you have the talent for. It shouldn't be something that gives you a societal status that you want to attain. So that's where I will start the changes from, right from the culture that we have imbibed and the reason for which we send people to universities.
Thank you so much. I think we've already gotten so much insight already just from the first part of this discussion. So I would like to ask a second question now. How can we ensure that young people, we've talked about all these amazing ideas, how can we ensure that young people have it real, applicable, and have relevant skills to both their employers and the world generally? So now, how do we go about making sure that all these things that we've spoken about actually come to fruition? So I'll start with Michael this time. Michael?
I mean, that's a very important thing to also look at. So if you kick off from what Zeal was just talking about, looking at the culture and particularly that culture and attitude to education, to say, why exactly am I being educated? Why do I need to get educated? If as individuals we can answer those questions before we get to school, you will find that a lot of things will be different. Classic example of that is that you have two students in the classroom. One of them came from home with a goal of making a first class. The other just came, has no idea what he has to do to even make a third class, let alone second class or first class. He or she is just hanging around, playing around and studying at the same time. The one that has a goal or a purpose is most likely going to achieve more remarkable success there. And that speaks to what Zee was speaking about earlier on, the purpose of being in school. Is the child going to school to attain some social status, or is the child going to school to learn? Now, if the purpose is for the child to learn, if we determine that indeed we want this child to learn, then the learning cannot begin at the university level, which is post-secondary school. Now, the learning has to start from way back before then, perhaps from our homes, all the way through to primary school, secondary school, and all that. So it has to be deliberate. Once we determine the purpose, why is this child going to school, then we must create a system or a structure that enables that purpose to be achieved. And this system or structure has to start from the home, all through. So we determine what things he or she will be exposed to at home, determine what things he or she will learn in primary school or in kindergarten, whatever it is, all the way before they even get to the university. So it is important to understand, again, once we determine all of these things, it is important to understand what the overall goal is and how do we structure or create a pathway that ensures that this child or these children actually come out of this process with the goal that we set out from the very beginning. So I think that is what needs to be done, part of what needs to be done rather.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael. I would like to ask Femi the same question about how we can go about it in a practical way. Yeah.
So I think in many ways, so many years ago, I worked in an institution in the UK, and one of the applied research institutions, and one of the studies was on how social change happens, and that thinking on how social change happens, in many ways, informs the way I see how this change can occur. Typically, social change starts first with an innovator, someone who sees that things can be different, that's willing to trial out a new approach of doing things. However, at some point, it needs to be scaled systemically. And unfortunately, the largest engine, unfortunately and unfortunately, the largest engine for skill that we have is the government. So at certain levels, some of these things will need to start with people who can show a different way of doing things. And which is why I'm pleased that this whole conversation we're having, starting with, say, Covenant University, because in many ways, and I worked for years in the tech sector, the university has been able to brand the people that have been coming out as the kind of people that employers in Nigeria are looking for. And then the question is, what do you do different? I think in many ways, being flexible enough and reaching a kind of flexibility that even the public universities in Nigeria need to be able to get to, in terms of what goes into the content of the curriculum, what are students learning, how it fits with what the market wants, and the amount of touch points and interactions that students are given with the market in many ways influences the kind of people that come out of the system. The second thing is the whole concept of jobs as we know it, as we've known it for years, is changing and is different. And the jobs that are going to be the most in demand in 10 years' time probably don't even exist just yet. A few years ago, we didn't know anything called influencer marketing or social media manager or data scientist. A lot of these roles are relatively new, and similarly, the world continues to evolve. And so when you have a system that is static, it can't catch up with the changes that are happening. And so we need to get to the place where an NUC, for example, becomes more flexible, that's Nigerian University Commission, becomes more flexible in determining what goes into the curriculum. And universities have to have more power and more say in shaping what all those are. The other thing to note, and to what I said about jobs changing, the whole idea of starting in one company and ending your life in that company is a phenomenon of our parents' generation. Yet today, you still have parents that are forcing kids to go study medicine and law and banking and finance and all the courses that are yesterday's courses, forgetting the fact that in future, or not realizing that in future, it's going to be less about being a specialist in one specific discipline and your ability to rapidly unlearn and relearn the new technical skills that are needed for roles that evolve, while simultaneously building your transferable soft skills. And until we realize this, the minute we realize this, then we'll realize that siloing the university or tertiary institutions into disciplines in and of itself is a mistake. The world is moving to transdisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity. And we need to be thinking about that too, because the skills we need for the kind of change we want are not stuck in one discipline. So you need everyone who's studying law needs to understand IT. Everyone who is studying medicine needs to understand IT. At the moment, each of those things are treated as single boxes, whereas we need to move to a place where we start making sure those combinations happen and people are able to learn across disciplines. I'll stop there.
Oh, thank you. I think those are really, really important points. I really loved what you said about, being able to move through different careers. I remember when I went to the UK for my master's, a lot of my classmates had way more years of experience than I had, and we had similar tenures in school. And it was because throughout their education, even during their bachelor's degrees, they were doing different kinds of jobs at the side, whether it's selling, being a cashier at a boutique store, or taking care of kids, or working in the hospital. They were just building up on those skills, and those counted for them where it mattered the most. So I'll just like to hear Zill's opinion on this before we move to the next question.
I think one of the things, it's not an easy question to answer, especially when the question is directed at university, because university has multiple inputs. And so if the inputs are flawed, whatever the university is going to process, chances are the output is also going to be flawed. But one of the things that generally we haven't been able to do, I think it was Michael that touched on that, we don't have a curriculum that's relevant to our environment. And this is just my opinion. And that curriculum and all, I mean, I've been through primary, secondary, university. And one thing I found out too late regarding the entire educational process that I went through was that I was never taught how to learn. And we take it for granted. We know we teach teachers, we teach teachers to teach. We don't teach students to learn. And so no matter whether it is from primary to secondary to university, many of us sit in a classroom without understanding how to learn. And so when we leave, we are not even sure what we were meant to learn, if we learned anything. And then when you've gone through university and everybody assumes you've gone through university and therefore we assume that you've learned something, when it comes to applying what you've learned in a job role, it becomes impossible because you didn't even know why you were in university. You didn't even know what you were supposed to learn. You didn't know how to learn. And therefore, it becomes impossible to apply anything that you've been taught. It becomes a fluke. So it becomes like a chance thing that, okay, by chance, I can do this. And then two, I think it was Michael that said, what we're learning is it even relevant for what we need to do in our society? So if a country has a direction, you would find that that direction is embedded in the school curriculum from primary school, because you have to indoctrinate citizens into the vision of the country, teach them to learn the vision, and then teach them how to accomplish the vision. All of that is embedded in the formal education. And then when you are out of it, it becomes a habit that gets embedded in the informal education that happens outside of the schools. So it's not very easy discussing the changes that need to be made just in university, because university is taking a flawed input already. But that's what I think.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that point. I think one of our participants, Nike Akerele, said it, that it's difficult to design post-secondary education if we don't address the serious skill issues we have at the junior secondary and senior secondary level. You can only be effective post-secondary based on the knowledge and skills you acquire in secondary school. Yes, Nike, we completely agree with that. With that school of thought. Yeah, it has to start from the very beginning if possible. And I love what Zil said about working with the country's direction. If the direction of the country is clear, we can start, integrating the parts of it into our educational system. So I'll quickly move to our next question. Sorry?
Yes, Michael. Before you move on, just to reiterate the points that you just spoke to, and I think that Zin spoke to earlier on, concerning the national, how you can integrate learning into national development, as it were. That is very critical also, because if there are societies around the world where you find things just seem to work right. People just follow the instructions. They don't cross the road anyhow. Yes. They don't do things anyhow. Indeed, if you do anything out of the norm, it is easy to spot you out as a misfit. So, and these things they don't happen by fluke. It is because it has been designed that way for young people to understand basic things like crossing the road, how to speak with people, how to engage the authority, how to follow the rules, how to challenge the rules, how to question certain things. That you find that the society seems to be sane, seems to be civil. Now compare that to certain other kinds of environment where this deliberate teaching or deliberate learning process have not been put in place. What you find is chaos. Chaos everywhere. You find people challenging the policeman on the street. You even have the policeman challenging you and fighting you at the slightest provocation. All of these things are the consequence of either proper orientation and training and teaching or the lack of it. And you find that if, like Zil said, if there is a national goal, or a national agenda, you're likely going to find that institutions, even starting from home and secondary schools and primary schools, you find that they somehow align to those kind of national aspirations and goals, so much so that the individual citizens or students, as the case may be, are able to demonstrate some of these attributes that the society or the government desires of its people. So it is very important to look at it from that spectrum as well. I just wanted to highlight that portion of it.
Yes, thank you so much for that addition. I'll move right into the next question. So I'll start with Zeno. Zeno, how do you think we can ensure that people are in the career paths that fit their talents and personalities, and even, even the needs of the world and the nation? So I know you spoke about, self-awareness earlier on, and having people not being aligned with the career choices that they had made or that they're pursuing. I'd really love to hear from you.
Did you say Zeno or Zeal?
No, I said Zeno.
Okay.
I think she's not on the call anymore. I can't find her. Okay, so I guess I'll just throw the question to Zeal now.
Okay, me and my big mouth. What I would say is this. For people, what Zeno started with regarding self-awareness is very important. And that ties in exactly to the point I was making about learning how to learn. Because a lot of us have what we call natural talents. I'm not one of those that believes that. I'm one of those that believes because we do not know how we have learned things, by the time we find out what we have, we assume it is natural. I think that the informal learning starts with a child from inside his mother's womb. So by the time we start teaching children how to learn, not just learn about the environment or education, about learning about themselves. And in my opinion, this should start from age 5 or 6. By the time the child is a teenager, the child will have enough self-awareness and to understand what it is, not just what it is they can do or what they are built to do, but in addition, what they are good at and what they want to do. A lot of us found us
I don't think we can hear Zeal anymore.
Can you hear me?
Okay, now we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. So I was saying that because of the fact that we want something that gives us a certain status, we want something that allows us earn a living, we are picking our professions not from what we can do or what we want to do, but we're saying, what's going to give me a good enough living and make me a respectable member of society? What we want or what we can do or what we are skilled to do or what we desire or what the country needs comes in a far third, fourth place. So if we can teach people how to learn about themselves, which is what Zeno said about self-awareness, and you find that you prefer to do one thing instead of another, then you can start early to train that child. So for example, in my SS1, I did physics, chemistry, and biology. I had no intention of doing anything with my life that required physics and chemistry or biology. I knew that from then. But because of the type of curriculum we had, we are more or less forced to do that. But if we can start from age 13 or 14 to start to push children into the direction they want to go. Some children are clearly, they prefer to draw, some prefer to wander the world and be tourists. It doesn't matter. But we have to destigmatize those that don't go to universities. And that's what I think. I think Zeno's point, I hope she's back, the self-awareness, we need to start that from primary school, so that by the time people are getting into JS3, when we start to do some kind of specialization, we already know where they go, where they would fit. We can then attach proper guidance, counseling to them, to groom them and mentor them into what it is they want to do.
Thank you so much, Zil, for that. I think Zeno is back. So Zeno, while you were gone, I asked a question based on what you had said earlier about self-awareness. So I was asking, how can we ensure that young people are in the career paths that fit their talents and their personalities?
Yeah, I could actually hear you, but I was talking and but I couldn't, nobody could hear me. So thank you, Zil. Zil came from a very interesting angle. So ideally from primary school is the best time, because at the age of 13, they make their very first career decision. The very first active career decision that is made is at the age of 13. So if enough exploration has not been done, before that age, that point, 12, so these days about 11 to 13 becomes an identity crisis point, right? So they begin to experience all the trauma of being a teenager and saying, you want me to go to arts or commercial or technical school? I don't know what I want, right? And that crisis lingers on for a long time. So how do we approach career guidance at an early age? For the ages of from 3 to 6, a lot of exploration should be done. Now, contrary to what Zil says, there are specific things that children come with. No child is born an empty canvas. There are things that they come with, natural abilities they come with. Now, what is flawed is how we measure and quantify those abilities and how we identify those abilities are along the way, right? Especially for us in this climb. Even when we're using foreign tools, we don't adapt our foreign tools. So it's just a mess, right? When we begin to, at first it starts as observation, but it's very subjective, right? And so that's where skills like behavioral scientists come in to quantify, even from an early age, what are the pointers that this child have? Where are they pointing to? And how can we begin to help them explore further all of the possibilities that are in different clusters, whether from creative to sports to business, right? How do we begin to help open them up to explore? Because we have not done a lot of exploration, that's why we have adults who are not self-aware. Adults in junior secondary school, senior secondary school, who really struggle, who go to university and struggle, who come out, work in a place and struggle. And so a career is really about how much salary am I going to be paid as against what value can I create and what problem can I solve, which really is the real reason why careers exist or why people should pursue careers, to add value, to create value, to solve problem. And then it becomes difficult for us to even predict further to say, okay, how do we move again beyond just engineering, accounting, and banking, finance? Because the training from small has not been to spot problems as opportunities and then to create solutions to those problems that they see. So it's really from that exploring, given that children from that young age to explore. So it changes the way we do career days. So career days shouldn't be about somebody coming to talk about what they do for their 9 to 5. I don't even like that approach to career days. It should be about intense exploration. And it's so easy to do it. It's as simple as putting down a case study before a child. Why is this like this? And if you were given this, like, what would you do? We don't ask children questions. So we assume that they don't have any answers. But surprisingly, in my own finding, children have a lot of questions. I particularly grew up in a house with a very explorative dad. And there was you could ask stupid questions. I always ask very stupid questions. I experimented a lot and I'm grateful for the kind of parents I have, but not many people have that kind of parents. those kind of parents. And if parents are not like that, then schools are not like that, then imagine how choked up children are. They have questions that nobody can answer, and they're expected to behave like adults. Meanwhile, between your 0 to 13, your job description is just to be exploring, to explore as far. And so that exploration is then also helps a career guidance counselor or a mentor or someone to even guide and say, help you make an informed decision. But if there has not been any exploration, what are you making a decision on, right? So
Yeah.
exploration is very key for that age. So that's what career days should be about. That's the process of exploring. But let me say this final thing on this point. When we miss the process of, so there are 4 stages, there are 4 cycles a career must pass through: awareness, exploration, creating, and maintenance. Now, when awareness isn't done properly, exploring cannot be done. It's difficult. So you see a 35 years old person just starting exploring, which isn't bad, right? But imagine if that has been done earlier, what that person will be able to do now. Me, I started my exploring at 21. So I'm closer to my maintenance phase now because I've done a lot of exploring, I've done a lot of creating, and I'm at a stable career point where my mind is saying value creation. How do we add value? How do we solve problems? But many people have not even started the cycle. So how are we going to create a nation that would focus on innovation and value creation when many people are still, yeah, I hope this helps.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for this wonderful point. So I'll just quickly move to the next question now. So what new learning systems can we replace our current theory-based, approaches with, especially in our post-secondary school systems? So I'll throw this question first of all to Femi.
Thanks a lot. I mean, let me add to just something briefly on to the responses to the previous question, and I completely agree with all the panelists. We need to start with at very young age. We need to focus on self-awareness. However, I'm also very conscious that we already have lots of people for whom we have missed that young age boat. And so we need to be thinking about remediation. How do we still help them find a life and find a career that suits who they are? So not to say, so it's not an either or thing, but it's a go at the young people and at the same time target the people who are at that post-secondary phase. At the post-secondary phase, I think at that phase will be self-awareness will be moving to what I call competency awareness. So by that time, so in the early stage, you're trying to understand who am I, what do I like, what do I do well, what don't I do well, in which kind of environment do I thrive. At the older stage, you should be understanding what do I know, what can I do, in what kind of environment do I thrive to work, in which areas can I add value, and in which areas can I add value well, in which kind of areas do I suck at. Knowing all these things and having the opportunity to actually figure out all these things is best done not from listening to someone drone on for ages, but by trying your hands at lots and lots and lots and lots of different opportunities. The way to learn how to create value is by creating value. Creating value, but then going into a loop that involves getting critical feedback that you can use to improve your value creation processes the next time. And in many ways, this is how I think we may need to evolve our post-secondary education system. Moving away from you're passing the exam because you could listen to what the professor said in the class and repeat it word for word, to actually being involved in projects that involve you working with other people, putting what you have learned in practice. There's the I've forgotten it now. There's a framework that is used to grade learning that talks about knowledge at the very base and synthesis, and being able to actually evaluate and use it and synthesize it at the very top. And in many ways, the way our education system is very focused on knowing the theory, but not so much in the application. I had stats some time ago that close to 60–70% of the people from Nigeria who go to sit for the ACCA, the Accounting Professional Exam in the UK, fail on the first attempt. These are people who have ICANN in Nigeria. Because when they go for that exam, it's less about what is management accounting to more case studies that require you to apply concepts from different fields of the accounting profession. Now, when people do not have the opportunity, so we need to move to a system that actually moves away from just learning the theory to giving people lots of opportunities to actually apply. Our professors will need to do away with lots of their theory-based assignments to going into industry to understand problems that industry businesses are facing and bringing those into the classroom as challenges that their students can start working on. The last thing I want to say is, I think the incentive structure, particularly for our public tertiary institutions, is also flawed. At the moment, a public tertiary institution in Nigeria does not have as part of its KPIs their students getting into jobs. For them, their KPI is to recruit students, take them through the theory, and then at the end, pass them out of the system. The minute you move their incentive, and with that, their funding, to how many of their students are getting into jobs that match what the industry is looking for, then they start getting a reason to think about retooling the curriculum and the content and the flow of the university to match what industry is looking for. I'll stop there.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for these three very, very valid points about using case studies, moving from theory-based assignments to more challenging ones that, take into context real life situations, perhaps even ones that are currently occurring, and the incentive structures for the KPIs of the universities. So I'll just like to hear from Michael what he thinks about what new learning systems we can put in place to replace our current ones, if he has anything to add to it.
Well, I think Femi nailed it overall, and of course, other speakers before him. One thing I would like to throw in here at this point is, can we take the responsibility for a moment from the university or the government and place it on the individuals themselves? I'm talking about undergraduates now. The responsibility of exploring, the responsibility of finding themselves, the responsibility of understanding what their interests are, the responsibility of finding means of developing themselves. Because at this point, they are already latecomers, as Zeno mentioned. They did not have the opportunity in the early days for exploration and all that. So they're here now. At this point, what must you do? And I think Femi touched on the issue of internship. Very brilliant idea. People must explore different things, take personal responsibility for their personal growth and development. We understand that some people may not begin this process until they're 35 or more. But I have seen how by exploring, by doing stuff like finding opportunities for internship, volunteering in different organizations, or even by becoming members of extracurricular activities on your campuses, we have seen how people have transformed significantly. Some of these individuals were people that probably did not even understand why they were on campus. But because they're part of something that enables them to explore, to try their hands on different things, you find that those critical skills that are not necessarily taught in classroom the way they should, and I'm talking about skills like emotional intelligence, creativity, critical thinking, and the likes of them. Those skills that are not taught in classroom, as it were, you find that these people, once they understand what their passions are or what their drive is, and they understand, they begin to explore, you find that they begin to find themselves. And what happens is that they begin to succeed, they begin to excel in everything. So for a moment, take away the responsibility from the administrators of the institutions and from the government, and let us place it with the individual. To what extent are you taking the responsibility for your own self to say, okay, at this point, I need to understand what are the things that I like doing, and how do I develop myself in that regard? How do I find a mentor to take me on this journey? How do I push myself? And I mean, I have examples of individuals. Now, in the work that I do, we basically work with undergraduates in tertiary institutions. And I have seen a Nigerian student who went through the program, the Enactus program, graduated from here, had the chance to go to do his master's program in Canada. He did a program in Canada, and afterwards he applied for a job. Now it was a very tedious process for him, but at the end of the day, there were about 4 of them left at the final stage of the interview. And at this stage of the interview, they needed to showcase to meet with the MDs and the board members of the organization. He was the only one. At this time, he had not finished his master's. He was still on the master's. At this time, he was the only one that did not have a master's degree, and he was the only one that did not have working experience. But because of, and he was the only Black person also, I must say that. He was the only Black person amongst the 4 of them. Now, because of the experiences he had acquired while on campus, being part of this extracurricular activity and acquiring those soft skills that the future demands, that are not taught in the Nigerian universities. And he was able to draw from those experiences. He was able to demonstrate how much of those experiences he had. This young man, who was the youngest amongst the applicants, was the only Black person there, the only one without a second degree at the time, was the one that eventually got the job. But then he left from Nigeria and went abroad. Now, the point is, at some point in his life, he made that decision to say, I need, maybe consciously or otherwise, he made that decision that I need to develop myself and I need to improve in this area or that area. And again, maybe it wasn't scientific. He was just rolling with the tide, and he was able to acquire all of these things simply because he took the leap of faith. He pushed himself beyond the teachings of the university system, and he was able to develop those skills and those values that enabled him to succeed. So for me, I think that again, once we hold the government and institutions responsible for making certain things are put in place, we must also begin to challenge young people to say, in the absence of all this, what are you going to do about yourself? Because at the end of the day, you have to be responsible for your own development and your own success.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. I think I'll just ask this question to Zil, then we can move to the next question now. If you have anything to add. Okay.
I hope we've not lost him there.
I think we have. All right, so I'll ask Zeno, if you can hear me.
Hi, Ella, can you?
All right. So we're asking about what new learning systems we can put to replace the theory-based ones that we already have. Can you hear me?
Sorry, are you referring to Zeal or Zeno?
I asked Zeal first of all, but I think he was not on the call, or his network was on the
Yeah,
call.
Okay.
my connection went off, but I'm back now.
All right. You can just take.
So what's the question, please? Yeah.
All right. We were still speaking on what new learning systems we can put in place to replace our current theory-based approaches.
I think that's a question for a professional, so for a professional in the education sector. But I think, and I've said this before, education is the ability to ask the relevant questions for the purpose of getting the answers to provide a solution to a problem. And so one of the things we do not do well enough, in my opinion, is, and we don't teach people how to ask questions. And so you find that the generations coming up often ask questions in a manner that many people consider rude or insolent or condescending. So one of the things that should be part of the curriculum, apart from what I said earlier in teaching people how to learn, is also teaching people how to extract information from other people. And I don't think this is something that will be handled just in the formal education sector. It also has to be handled in the informal education sector. So it was either you or Zeno that was saying you were able to ask your parents a lot of questions. Not many people are able to do that. Many cultures in the country do almost forbid you from questioning an elder. We need to change that culture. We need to understand that the only way knowledge is transferred is through questions. Because when I was in university, my first 2 years of university, in some classes, my computer science class, we were maybe 800 or 900 in the class because everybody in the year was doing it at the same time in the science faculty. It's impossible to interact with a lecturer with 800 people. So we need to maintain, one of the things we need to do is to maintain a very, very strict teacher-student ratio. A classroom with more than 20 to 30 students will not be a proper learning environment because the interaction will be more dictation and regurgitating what has been dictated. We'll be testing memory, and that's what we do in Nigeria. We test people's memory. We don't test their ability to learn. And so we need to start framing the structure of the education, the teacher-student ratio, and even the ability and manner questions that are asked, and the type of answers that are required. I remember the first time I did a foreign exam, it was open book. They said, come with your calculator, come with anything you like. They give you the question scripts, and the invigilator goes and sits down. And we're like, so I can do anything. They said, do whatever you like. And you find that the answer to the question is your ability to understand what was taught. It's not John lives in a greenhouse and then what color was John's house? You write green. No. We don't frame our education in that manner that forces people to actually understand and learn something because we haven't taught people how to learn. We don't know how people learn. So those are some of the things I would say we should change. 1, teacher-student ratio. 2, they are teaching people how to learn. 3, teaching people how to ask questions, teaching people how to transfer knowledge, and teaching people how to apply them. All of that is learned from the home all through secondary school. All of that is what is then applied in university education. You don't learn it in university. You apply this learning in university. Yeah.
All right. These are all very, very wonderful points, but we are running out of time. I think we have just 15 minutes left for the session, and I still want us to take some from the audience. So I'll just throw this question to Femi now. I know you've been very much involved in the tech space. So what lessons can we learn from the tech sector talent building programs that we can apply in our educational system post-secondary and even moving forward from that?
Thanks for the question. So even though I'm in the tech sector, I'm particularly what I'm doing now. I'm again not obsessed. I don't believe technology is a solution to everything.
Yeah.
I'm not a techno what's the word now, file or whatever you call it. I see it as a tool that we can use. That said, I think if there's anything interesting that's coming out of there, it's how we're seeing new learning systems that are disrupting formal education. So you have a number of tech boot camps now that that are now being ranked higher than some computer science degrees. When large multinational tech companies are looking for people to hire, because those programs are built with a very strong focus on people learning how to do. And they're finding that is at the end being more focused than spending 4 years doing a lot of courses that you actually have no intention of using at any point, or you probably will never be called on to use at any point in the future. So employers are liking that those programs are homing in straight on, these are the critical skills or competencies that are required for these roles, and these programs are teaching to those skills directly. And I think we need to see more of that beyond the technology space. Zeno's point around asking questions, being able to analyze information is a critical fundamental skill for being able to create value. If you don't understand the question, you can never give the right answer. You cannot never provide the right solution. So you need similar thinking for people who are in the, whether it's in the marketing field or in business analysis or in project management, you name it. So where we look at and deconstruct what are the competencies that are required for this, taking the fact that you have the base level competency, what learning framework can we lay on top of this that can get you from 0 to 70 in a very short period? I think that's what we can learn.
Well, thank you so much for that insight. I'll quickly go to our question and answer section. I encourage all participants to ask questions in the question and answer session so that I can pose them to our panelists. So I see one from Nike. She said, how relevant are 21st century skills for our youth in view of our African or / local context? Who wants to take that question?
Well, let me give it a shot.
All right.
The thing is, to know whether what we're doing is relevant for the future, we have to know what future we're aiming towards. So, for example, we know the future China planned for itself. And so I can imagine what they've done to tweak their educational system to fit that. What future do we plan for ourselves? And I can't really speak for Africa's
I think we lost Zil. I think his connection is a bit shaky. So while we wait for him, can anyone else continue the conversation on that?
Yes, I was just going to say, just to follow the line of thoughts of Zil, we first will need to determine, as I was stated here earlier on, that education should fit into a national plan.
Yeah.
National developmental plan. Many years ago in, I think it was in Singapore, Singapore started off as a very poor nation with little or nothing, really. No much of resources in the country at the time. But they made a deliberate effort from the very beginning to say, listen, we're going to develop the human capital, and they were deliberate. It became part of the national agenda. It was the plan that the only resource we have are our people. So we are going to invest in the people and develop the people so that these people that have now been developed will be able to provide solutions to our problems. and we might also be able to export some of these knowledge that we have acquired, some of these solutions that we're finding for ourselves. So it all comes, and today, Singapore is one of the most flourishing countries in the world. How many years later? Meanwhile, Singapore is a country that secured its independence about 6 years after Nigeria did. But we are not on the same level. Singapore is a country that had little or no resources, natural resources compared to Nigeria. But we are not at the same level today. And the singular difference is the commitment to develop the human capital. And that was a plan that was integrated into the national plan, right? So it comes down again to the way Fasiq put it. What is the future that we are aspiring for? And then once we determine that future and we are sincere about it, we then need to look at what are the things or what specific goals must our education sector achieve for us to be able to reach out for that future that we aspire for. Now, what role will the education sector play? And then we'll begin to talk about how to structure the education sector to ensure, whether formal or informal now, to ensure that we deliver on those goals that feed into that national developmental agenda. And I think that is it really. We must have that plan, that national goal, and then, or national developmental goal, and then create a pathway, leveraging education as a tool to achieving that.
All right, thank you so much, Michael. I think Zil has joined the conversation again. I don't know if he wants to quickly.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know. So I heard Michael, and I think Michael pretty much summarized what I was going to say. It is, we have a national vision. If we have a national vision, that national vision has to be seen and felt across every sector. We can't mouth national vision of agriculture and be bringing up schools for medical science all over the place. It has to tie into what we want. And I do not believe that we have done that yet. Number two, the future of the world is evidently moving into the world of artificial intelligence, robotics, technology. I am not convinced, and these things become habits. I'm not convinced that most of us that use technology today learned it in school. It's a habit. It becomes part of the culture. Is our school curriculum inculcating the culture the world is moving into at the age of 5, 6, 7? Because I didn't learn to use a smartphone in university. I didn't learn to use Google in university. It's a culture. It's a work environment culture. The world is moving into robotics, artificial intelligence, and all those things. Are we also embracing them? Or are we still being very backward and teaching people how to type on typewriters? So those are the things that if we see the vision we want, we see where the world is going, our educational system and curriculum must formally and informally compensate for all that.
Yes. Thank you so much, Zil and Michael, for that question. So just to add to that, I think...
Can I?
Okay, sure. Yes, Femi, please, you can.
No, so I was just going to say specifically on 21st century skills.
Yeah.
I think in many ways, 21st century skills represent a lot of the transferable skills, but they are generic. I think we need to localize it. We need to bring it into our own context.
All right.
What does critical thinking, what does creativity, what does collaboration, what does communication mean in our context? And that ties to what Michael and Zil say about tying it to our national agenda. But I think there's also a broader point which is important to mention. Unfortunately, the guardians of our formal and informal education systems right now, from parents through to teachers and professors, are victims. I'll call them victims of the system that didn't work. And most of them do not know more than the system that they were groomed in. And so part of what we'll need to do to make things change is to also do a deep re-education, even to the home of parents that are raising toddlers, of professors who are afraid of losing their power in a system that they are familiar with, even if that system doesn't work for the larger good. I think we need to get to that level of both education, re-education, and if possible, creative destruction for us to be able to move forward to an education system that works for where we want to be as a society.
Thank you so much, Femi, for that addition. These are all really, really important points. So let me quickly move to another question. So an attendee who chose to be anonymous is asking, he or she says, you have talked about the need for self-awareness, change of curriculum, data, change of culture, etc. These are important things that many others have talked about over the past few years. What practical steps can we take to begin to shift things in the right direction? I think we've spoken about that quite a bit, but I'll be happy to hear any extra thoughts or further thoughts on that from our panelists.
I will say it in 2 words: national framework for development. There needs to be a policy on education, and that policy can only will become relevant if it is tied to a national goal or national agenda. But there has to be that policy.
Yes, I agree with that. It has to come from the top. But I don't know if anyone has anything else to add, maybe ways, even outside the government, we can, in our own little ways or in our silos, do something.
Yeah,
Let me,
if you don't mind. Okay.
Okay, Zeno, go for
let me
it.
say something. Okay, Zeno, go ahead. Go ahead, Zeno.
Okay, so I really appreciate the perspective from a macro point.
Yeah.
But I'm a strong believer in the micro effects, little micro effects that sums up to then push the government to make active change, right?
Yeah.
And I know that families are key stakeholders when it comes to human capital development. However, they are the weakest link and the most vulnerable points that are not paid attention to. So I really appreciate what Femi mentioned, right? Because they are the weakest link and they are the most vulnerable points, even at this time of a pandemic, families are the most vulnerable now that the learning has moved from classrooms to home. A lot of parents are confused. They don't even know what to do and how to navigate it. But this singular unit of our human capital, right, is the starting point where many magical things can happen. So parent education is very key. It is the least. So if you're a school owner and you're investing in parent education at this time, you're doing a lot. You're investing in parent assistance and parent support, then you're playing a very strategic role, right? If you're into education consulting and you're doing that parenting support at this time, right, to enable parents to give the best education, learning and development to their families, create a family vision and constitution. Because when we look at the human capital, the global human capital is really units of families. So you employ somebody, and the person is working for you. He reflects behaviors, but those behaviors were learned from somewhere, reinforced somewhere, began from somewhere. So the family link is so important. I just want to come from that point. And imagine if one father, one mother become intentional, one father, one mother become intentional, a single parent become intentional. That changes the output that those children can produce. That changes the output that a young adult can produce, right? That changes the outcome that even a full-grown adult can produce. And the ripple effect of those little steps are phenomenal in the larger, by the time it's put together, you know. And that is because we are in an environment where literally like the government is not proactive. The government, you have to talk, even when you are talking, it's like, what are we here? Are they even hearing what we're saying? Do you understand? So micro effects I feel has a stronger pull by the time we begin to do intentional steps, micro effects. One family, one school, one family, one school, one organization being intentional about employee selection, employee talent development, competency development. Those little things, the ripple effect is what we begin to see in 5-10 years. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zeno.
Okay. Can
I
I
think Femi is
quickly
trying
add?
to add something. Okay, yes.
Yes. So I think a few things. So and I agree with Zeno too. I think we need to do micro. But I think where we usually fail is actually scaling micro successes. So the whole system, society itself is not bad.
Yeah.
The problem is that the things that work are usually very, very tiny, and we're never able to move them to mainstream. So a few things that I think we need to do. One, I think we need to start identifying pockets of success, and we need to find ways to amplify them. And part of the work that's required in doing this is at certain levels, deconstructing success stories. I remember a few months ago, and I mentioned this earlier, seeing a Twitter storm about how come Covenant and Babcock are producing very solid graduates into the workforce. I'd love to see researchers, academic researchers, who can actually conduct studies on pockets of successes in our tertiary system that has resulted in churning out quite a bit of talent. But I also like us to see us go a step further and see how we take those academic studies and convert them into media that is easy to read and understand, and lessons learned that others can take and jump on. I'd love to see institutions like Covenant, again, because they're part of the conveners of this platform. I'd love to see them be also intentional in sharing what they do that works well with other institutions within the country and across the continent. Until we get that level of sharing what works, we will not be able to take things that work on a small scale and blow it up large. And I think at this stage, we need things that can scale.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. I think we've seen it from both the macro and the micro perspectives, which are all very important. So we have I've gone past our time limit, and I apologize to everyone, but I know it's such an interesting conversation, and there's still loads of, interesting questions I'm seeing in the questions box, and definitely we can't take everything, but I see one interesting one about how we can close the gap between the rural areas and the urban ones in creating awareness on self-actualization in education, and even perhaps all the other things we have discussed. I think I'd like to ask you, what do you think about this closing the gap between the rural areas and the urban areas in all these things you've spoken about today? Because
I think it's something that's absolutely necessary for national development. We need as many people to be educated as possible. We don't need as many people schooled. We need much more people educated, and we make the mistake of assuming that because we're schooled, we're educated. It's not the case. With the internet penetration that we have, there is a lot of education that is possible at our fingertips. But the thing is, if you have not been taught how you learn, and you have not been taught how to extract information, then a smartphone in a stupid hand is not going to give you any additional advantage. A lot of us have the ability now to sit in our houses and learn as much as we want. And what I've done with my children, they ask me, every question they ask me, I give them my phone and I tell them, Google it. Not because I don't know the answer, but because I'm teaching them how to get the information for themselves, which for me is the bottom line of education. So people in the rural areas, we need to teach them how to get information. If you find a certain type of weevil in your farm, what weevil is it? You have a phone that has a camera. How do you use the internet and technology to solve your problems? And that is the education they need in the rural areas, using the technology that they have and to get the information that they need to solve the problems that they experience. That is what education is. So it's not whether you're in the rural area with internet penetration, there should be no significant advantage, whether you're in the city or in the rural area. And this is what we need to take to them, teach them how to get the information for themselves.
All right. Thank you so much for that perspective. I'd like to hear what Michael has to say about that.
Hi, Ella.
Hi, Michael.
I'm sorry, I was a little bit distracted, so I didn't quite get the question.
Okay, I'll repeat the question. So we're just talking about how we can close the gap between the rural areas and the urban areas in creating awareness for self-actualization in education, and also through to generally most of the other things we had spoken about, because that gap already exists. So how do we close the gap, especially in addressing all these things we've discussed today?
Yeah, so that's a very tough question. However, those gaps exist between the rural and the in the rural areas and the urban areas. I think one of the things we may have to do is to resort to informal learning in those rural areas. Now, every child learns something virtually every day, and it starts from home, it starts from society, from community, and in their everyday interactions with other people, whether they are parents or siblings or their friends and their relations, however. There are different mechanisms in those rural communities through which people learn. Do we jettison those? The answer is no. How do we integrate those into the formal learning structure? That would be something to look at, to see how do we identify those informal learning structures, and how do we formalize them or integrate them, as the case may be, into a system that guarantees success at the end of the day.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I think Timo was trying to say something.
Yes, please.
All right.
I just want to contribute a bit.
Oh, yeah.
And I've just noticed a very interesting trend and pattern in our conversations in answering this particular question. And it sinks in with my thoughts when it comes to building happily productive nations or a happily productive community. How important that the bridging of the gap between the urban and rural, still that single small unit is still so key. Now it looks like, is this theory, or how do we explore this? How do we scale this? However, I feel like if there's a model that works, and I see it this way. So if we empower a father or a mother with these tools instantly within a rural community, we're able to automatically empower that child within that family to begin the process of bridging the gap. Zio mentioned something. He said when his child asks him, and they ask him a lot of questions, and he gives them the phone, go check Google, right? Go find those answers. Now, the children in those areas cannot grow as far as the facilitators of knowledge that they've been exposed to within that community. Now, the fathers, the parents, the teachers within those places are facilitators of knowledge. They are the key facilitators of knowledge. So the children are only able to grow to the extent that the facilitators of knowledge within those communities have grown.
Yeah.
So the actual economic empowerment needs to come from those people. Then we'll be able to fast track, because even if we go with all the technology into those communities, right, and the stakeholders, which are these parents, which are these teachers there, are not empowered, it looks foreign. It will be treated as foreign.
Yes.
And then the real impact that we want to have is going to water down. However, so I see it like this, and I've always known this, and we've explored it at work a lot, that a happily productive father equals a happily productive child. A happily productive mother equals a happily productive child. Because a happily productive father is automatically intentionally involved in the child's education, because there's a vision he's seeing and saying, oh, I know that my child can, if I push this child to this degree, right? He can become this because he has already been empowered to see. So it's a lot of unraveling. So even with what I've said, there's still layers and layers and layers of meaning that we still need to unravel. However, I think there's something there, and I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. Unfortunately, we are way past our time limit and we wouldn't be able to take any more questions. I still saw a lot of wonderful questions and I still had a lot of questions in my notepad that I was itching to ask, but this is where we would have to draw the curtains today. But then I'll give our panelists one last opportunity to say some last words before we close the session for today. Thank you all so much. This was really interesting. This was informative and this was very educating. And I think we all agree that we got some practical steps that we could use ourselves and advocate for even the wider public community to adapt. So I'll give our panelists the opportunity to say their last words. I'll start with Femi.
Okay, so I mean, in terms of last words, my thoughts are that the world is changing, the world is evolving, and again, depending on which perspective we're coming at this from, whether we're universities or we're academics or we're young people ourselves, we need to stay aware to be sure that how we're preparing ourselves or preparing young people is reflective of how the world larger, but also our own world is changing. And this requires being flexible, being able to learn and unlearn things. So we can't afford to be stuck in yesterday's thinking. If we carry that forward as a guide in what we do, it will help a lot in ensuring that we can actually contribute to creating post-education opportunities that actually help our young people thrive in a world that we're not even certain how it's going to look in 5 years or 10 years time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Femi. I would ask Zeno to give her last words too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share. Thank you for the opportunity to engage. I really enjoyed myself. So my last words are, it starts with a question. I like asking questions. How do you prepare for a future you cannot see? A future that we do not know how it's going to take shape. And I think that the real answer to that question is the ability to see opportunities, to spot problems, right? And see the opportunities within the problems. Now, once we are able to follow this trend, we'll be able to predict the future to a good degree of what industries are going to evolve, what roles are going to evolve, how is it going to look like? And then being self-aware enough to accept who we are, where we are, evaluate where we are, accept where we are, and then begin to create the roadmap for intentional development. So those two things, yeah.
Thank you so much, Zeno. We loved having you. Could Michael give us his last words too? Thank you so much for gracing us with you.
Thank you for having me again, Ella. So for me, teaching is beyond literacy and numeracy. A very important part of teaching is also about life skills. And the future that we are getting into is a future that requires these life skills of critical thinking, life skills of emotional intelligence, active learning and growth mindset, leadership skills, interpersonal communication skills, analytical skills, and the ability to embrace change or to become flexible in our learning. These are skills that always makes the difference. So whilst institutions that are created to instill these learnings in young people may have a responsibility to do that. I want to challenge people. Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Mike. We can.
Okay, great. So whilst there are institutions that are responsible for, ensuring that young people have these skills, I want to also challenge people to take their personal development as their personal responsibility, to say to what extent can I reach out and prepare myself for the future, and what are the necessary skills I must acquire. If you can't get them in formal education, there are informal systems through which you can get these things. Internship, as one of the speakers has mentioned earlier on, you have the opportunity to volunteer during your spare time in different organizations. If you're still a student, you can engage in extracurricular activities that expose you to global best practice, that helps you to develop your skills and competencies. And you can find someone who you can model your life after, and that person becomes a mentor. And there are different ways by which individuals can develop themselves beyond literacy and numeracy. And I challenge everyone to seek those kind of mediums and be able to achieve their personal growth and development. Ella?
Okay, I think Ella is...
oh, yeah.
Okay,
Sorry,
she's back. Awesome.
Yes, sorry. My network tripped off briefly. I don't know if Zio has given his final words, or it's time for me to call on him too.
I'm just about to do that. So
All right, fantastic.
I think everybody has said a lot of things I would have said, so I'll just keep mine very brief. And I would say that education and schooling are not the same thing. We can be educated through school, but that's not the only way. And for me, education is the ability to ask the relevant questions, to get answers, to provide solutions. If there's anything in our culture that impedes that, then we need to get rid of it. So we need to be teaching people how to ask questions, how to get answers, and how to fix problems. That is what an educated society does. Number two, we also need to emphasize, as much as we emphasize on teaching, we need to emphasize on learning, because we learn in different ways. Don't understand how people learn, then we cannot replicate the learning experiences that we want to propagate in society. Learn how people learn, so that we can teach people to teach people in the appropriate way for them to learn. And I think that's one of the things we've missed in the curriculum of the country.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone that participated and attended. You all asked wonderful questions. This was a very insightful and interesting conversation. I just want to remind everyone that the conversation continues tomorrow. The first session is by 12 noon, and then we have another one same time by 1:30 p.m. So I'll be signing off from here and handing over to Stephen, just to say some last words if he has anything to say.
Thank you so much, Ella. Thank you for the moderation. And thank you so much to all our panelists. Deeply, deeply, deeply thankful. Kule and I, we deeply appreciate what you've done. I've learned a lot personally, extremely. I've learned a lot. Thanks for, and I tried to put a number of the things that I felt were striking at the chat section, and I've decided to save the chats. Thank you so much. Femi Longe, thank you so much. Deeply appreciate, and I'm glad to connect with you via this platform. Thank you so much, Zeno. I know we had a conversation in time past on EduStat, and here we are again on this platform. Michael Ajayi, thank you. We've done so much with the NAPTOS. Thank you for what you do. Deeply appreciated. And Zio, I trust we'll do a number of things together. I really enjoy your perspective. I'm really impressed about your perspective. Thank you so much for sharing, and we're deeply thankful. We'll continue this program again tomorrow with panel 3 and with panel 4. And as Ella has said, the first session will be at 12 noon, while the second will be at 1:30. That is the panel 3 and the panel 4. Thank you so much. Thank you once again also to all our attendees and to our panelists. We are deeply thankful. Thank you so much. I hope that with this, because we are going to gather facts from what our panelists have said and from this discussion, and it's going to be in a report which are going to make available to our panelists and to the attendees as they're required. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, bye-bye.